Now, in this topic, we have to learn any members of the class. Okay, what are those members? And in using those members, we have to use objects. Okay, that is every object is a member of a class. Okay, after creating a template for the class, we can create different instantiation. And we can create more classes and we can relate more classes, one class to the other class. We can specify a relationship between two classes. And in Java, we have to use inheritance. And for classes, okay, we have to create objects or we have to create instantiation of a class. Okay, we can create objects out from the template that we have created. And we have the relationship here is a. Okay, it's an is a relationship because an object is an instantiation. It's a concrete instantiation of a class. Okay, for example, creating a template for a fish and getting the properties of the fish and um, specifying the behavior of fish. Okay. And from the template of a fish that we have created, we can create any objects for the fish. We can create a shark. We can create a dolphin, for example. Okay. We can create a lapu-lapu, just like that. And we can say that a shark is a fish. A lapu-lapu is a fish. Okay. And we can reuse the template that is being created. So for this one, it will promote reusability of the template being created. And methods are often called upon to return a piece of information to the source of the request. Since later we are going to create an object in a class that is placed in another class. That is why we have to use the access specifier, public or private. Okay? Now, for that class, which contains the um, objects instantiation, it can be called a client class or client user. So client class or class client or class user is any application or a class that instantiates objects of another pre-written class. Now, to create a class, we have to use the name, that is any legal identifier. Okay? After creating a class name, we have to determine what data and what methods to be part of the class. Just like for a fish, what are the data that are needed for a fish? Just like assigning a breed, a name, an ID, for example, if ever you will assign an ID for each of the fish. Then create a class header with three parts: the access specifier, the keyword class, and the class name, which is any legal identifier. The access specifier public, this class is accessible by all objects. Okay, just like this one, creating a class employee, we have the class header public class employee. Since class employee is being declared public, so can be used by any other object. Now, can be extended also, as I've said. It to be used as a basis for any other class. Can be used as a parent class or as a subclass, for example. Now, what are the fields? And these data fields are the variables declared within a class, but outside any other method. Again, these are the variables to be declared within a class, but outside of any method, so that any methods can be used for these variables. And the instance variables, these are the non-static fields given to each object. Now, the private access for fields. So, any members with private access can be used only within the class, but not outside the class. So, only methods of the same class are allowed to use private variables. It prevents from the other class to access the private members of the class. And this will implement information hiding. So, the private members are being hidden from the outside access. And most class methods are public since methods will be used outside the class. So the access modifier public will be used. And we can apply private access specifier for the fields for the data member. Now, our class can contain mutator methods, accessor methods, and any other non-static methods. Mutator methods will be used to set or change the field values. And accessor methods from the word access will be used to retrieve the values. Non-static methods are instance methods. And these mutator methods can be a non-static methods. Okay? Can be instance methods, which belongs to objects. And typically, we will be using the non-static methods and data fields for our class for our demonstration. And static class variables are not instance variables. Okay, later on, we will demonstrate and use the non-static methods and non-static variables. We have the table here which shows the difference between the static and the non-static members of a class. Okay. The keyword static can be used as an adjective. Okay. The static fields in a class are called the class fields. In comparison, okay, if there is no static keyword to be used, there is no keyword for non-static items when you do not explicitly declare a field or a method to be static. Then it is non-static by default. Non-static fields are called the instance variables. And non-static methods are instance variables. I mean instance methods. Okay? When using the static field or method, you do not use an object for accessing that method. In contrast, with the use of non-static, we need to use the object for accessing that method within the class. Okay? With the use of static, when you create a class, with static field and instantiate 100 objects, only one copy of that field exists in memory. But with a non-static field and instantiate 100 objects, then 100 copies of that field exist in memory. So different memory addresses will be assigned for each of those objects. Okay. Then when you create a static method in a class and instantiate 100 objects, then one copy only of the method exists in memory and the method does not receive this reference. Okay. Since only one memory address will be assigned for that object. In contrast, when you create a non-static method in a class and instantiate 100 objects, only one copy of the method exists in memory, but the method receives a this reference that contains the address of the object currently using it. Then here, non-static variables, static class variables are not instance variables. And here, instance fields or methods are non-static, meaning when we create non-static members of a class, they are instance variables and instance methods, okay, which the system allocates a separate memory location for each non-static field and in each instance. Okay. Now, we have a figure which shows a summary of legal and illegal method calls based on combinations of method modifiers. Now let's try to evaluate. In this one, object.pub non stat method, in which object is the concrete name of my class. Okay? We have created the my class and created an instance named object for that class. Here, creating an object will be used in this way. The name of the class, the object name or the instance name, the assignment operator equals, and the new operator that is used for instantiation, which requesting a memory address to be allocated for our object, and the name of our class with a pair of parentheses. This is how will we create an instance of a class. And this object named object will be used to access the public members of my class. Like this one, okay? By the way, this is our class definition. Okay, the class definition contains public class, pub, stat method. They are just method declaration. And this one, this statement here, the public non-static method can be used from test class within a my class object. So pub non-stat method, which is this one, is non-static. So therefore, we can use or we can call the pub non-stat method in any other class with the use of the object. Okay? In the second one, object.pubstat method, wherein the public static method can be used from test class with or without an object. Okay? Take note, pubstat method is declared static. So can be used with or without object. Okay, so it's legal here. This one, my class dot pubstat method, wherein pubstat method is declared as static and using the class name directly, that the method name is legal with the use of static modifier. So here, with the static modifier being used in the object, in the method pubstat method, so the object name can be used or the class name can be used directly. Pwede siya. So can be used from test class with or without an object. And here, these statements here will not work. Now let's try to examine. You have the statement my class dot priv stat method. Okay, where is that method? Priv stat method. Priv stat method. This is declared as private. Take note, private modifier is only private within the class. It will not work since the test class doesn't have access to the private method. Since it's declared private, test class is not allowed to use the private members of any class. So, it's illegal. It will not work here. Here, another one, my class dot pub non-stat method, where pub non-stat method here is not declared as static. Therefore, dapat mogamit siya og object. But in this case, the class name is being used directly. So it's not working here. It will not work here to use the class name directly for accessing the instance member of a class. To make this one work, we have to replace my class with the object name. Next one, object dot priv stat method. And here, object dot priv non stat method. Priv stat method is private, and this one, priv non stat method, is private. Therefore, it is not accessible outside this class. It is not accessible in any other class. The last one is my class dot priv non-stat method. Priv non-stat method is private. Okay? The first place, it's private. Therefore, it's not accessible outside this private, this class, my class. Okay? Now, creating instance methods in a class. In a class employee, for example, and you have an instance variable emp num that is of type integer and the private access specifier is being used. So emp num can be used only within this class but cannot be used in any other class. And we have the accessor method for this emp num and mutator method for this emp num. So in every instance variable, there must be corresponding accessor and mutator methods for this field, right? So the accessor method is a value returning method. Okay, take note. The accessor method, since we need to access the value, there is a value being returned. Therefore, the type of method for this accessor method must be equal to the value of the field being declared. Just like this one, since empnum is being declared as integer, the accessor method must be of type integer value returning method, right? This mutator method is just setting the value for the field empnum, must have to use the type void. And within this method is just setting up the value. So this must contain a parameter that will be used to set the value for the emp num. Alright? Now, organizing classes, we have to place the data fields in logical order. That is at the beginning of the class. That is first, before setting up the accessor and mutator methods, we have to place the fields first. Okay? And we have to list the fields vertically. That is, enumerate the fields, specify the type, and use the access specifiers. And usually, the data fields, we have to apply the private access specifier for um, promoting encapsulation, right? For the information hiding so that the data will be hidden from the outside access, right? Then the data fields and methods may be placed, may be placed in any order within a class. And it's common to list all data fields first, as I've said. Names and data types can be seen before reading the methods that use the data fields. We have to identify the data for the class and what are the getters and setters. Getters are accessor methods and setters are the mutator methods. Mutator will be used to mutate the values or set the values. Okay? Now, another or additional fields for the employee, we have declared empnum. Another necessary data for each employee is the last name, first name, emp salary. Okay? Emp num here is being placed as the first data field, specifying, for example, that this emp num is the unique identifier for each of the employee. Diba? For example, my ID number is unique in any other employee. So we can make this one as private and we can make this one as our primary key because this identifies a unique identifier for the employee. So it will be defined first, right? So after defining the fields for the employee, okay, the setters and getters will follow. Like here, getter for the employee number, setter for the employee number, getter for the M plus name, and setter for the M plus name, and so on. Now, by convention, the getters will start with the get word. Okay, to specify that this method is an accessor method for the num. And this one, set emp num, is the setter method or mutator method for the emp num. Okay, take note, get and set. Get for the getter method for the field. Set is the setter method for the field. Since we are using the camel case type for naming our variables and methods or any legal identifier, the next word must be in capital letter. Just like this, get emp num. E and N are in capital letters. Okay? Getters and setters for the other fields like last name, setters for the class name, I mean the last name, um, getters for the first name, setters for the first name, getter for employee salary, setter for employee salary. Right? Now is using the objects. Okay, declaring the objects to use their methods. We have to use the new operator, okay, to allocate a memory address for our object. Now, to declare an object of the class, we have the syntax, class name, then the object name. It to be used. And in this case, the reference variable some employee is being used. And to instantiate this object, we have to have the statement some employee is equal to new employee. Or you can use a single statement of these two statements here. Employee, some employee is equal to new employee. So we are declaring an object, some employee of type employee. So we can use this object name to access the public members of this employee class. All right. So the reference object is being created to use the public members of the class. Okay, this is the name for a memory address where the object is held. Now, we can use the constructor method. Okay, the constructor method will be used to create and initializes class objects. Okay, and we can create our own constructor methods. If ever we haven't created our constructor, Java will create one for us. Okay, Java will create automatically a constructor method for that class. The name of the constructor is always the same name of the class. Again, the name of this constructor must always use the same name of the class. And to use the method for accessing the public members, the dot operator will be used. Okay? The dot operator will be used to access the method or to access the methods of the class. Okay, just like this one. There are two instances being created of class employee, clerk, and driver. So clerk and driver will be used accordingly. Okay, will be used for any instance of these methods or of this class. So clerk dot set employee. So that operator is being used to access set emp number of the class employee for the object clerk. So there are two objects being created for one class. So there are two. We can create clerk for employee. A clerk is an employee, driver is an employee, manager is an employee, supervisor is an employee. So we can create as many objects as we want depending on the purpose of the application. All right. Now, the data hiding. All right. So, to prevent the outside access of the data, we have to use the private access modifier. But to set and get or to get the or to access the values of those data, okay, we have to use the public methods, okay, the getter methods and the setter methods. So only these methods can be used in any other class, but of course with the use of the object. Now, for the constructor, for example, if you do not uh, create a constructor for your class, Java will create automatically for you. And for using the constructor, we have this one. Okay, this is actually a calling method with named employee. In this case, the default constructor is being created. That is without the arguments here. But you can create a constructor that is a constructor with parameters. Now, for diba, as I've said, constructors will be used to set the data fields for the class members. Okay, initially the default constructors will be used for setting the default values. Like for example, for the numeric values, 0 will be used as a default value. For the character, have the Unicode character. For the Boolean values, we have the false. The non-primitive object fields like object, we have the null default value. For the string, we can use the null or the empty literal string. Okay, for the constructor method, public access modifier will be used since client class will be used to declare an object for that one. Okay, just like this one. This is a constructor method for the class employee. Take note, a constructor method is a method having the same name of the class. That is public employee without the return type. Okay, without the void, for example. Now, from the class that you have create, and use that class as the data type for the reference variable, and often it is referred to as the abstract data type or the ADTs. For the ADTs, the implementation is being hidden and the data can be accessed through its public methods. And These ADTs, or these classes that you have created, can be a programmer defined data type and not built into the language. For the class that you have created, you can declare an object from one of any classes and can be used as a type for the identifier for our reference variable.